The bullet missed Jacob Thorn's head by 3 inches. He felt the heat of it slice past his ear before the crack of the rifle even registered. His horse reared. The Arizona night exploded into chaos, hoofbeats, shouting, the metallic taste of fear. Jacob hit the frozen ground hard, rolling behind a boulder as 2 more shots chipped stone above him. Someone wanted him dead. Tonight, 3 days before Christmas, 1882. But that wasn't the strangest part of his evening. The strangest part was the woman. She appeared like a ghost in the gunsmoke, stumbling through the sagebrush 50 yards from where Reed's hired guns were trying to kill him. Dark hair whipping wild in the December wind. Traditional Apache dress torn and muddy. She collapsed face first into the snow, and Jacob Thorn, widower, recluse, a man who'd sworn off caring about anyone ever again, made the stupidest decision of his life. He ran for her. More bullets sang past. Jacob scooped her up, lighter than he expected, burning with fever despite the cold, and somehow made it back to his horse. The shooters were closing in. He could hear them crashing through the brush, whooping like this was sport. Like killing was just another Saturday night entertainment out here in the territories where law was a distant joke and mercy was for the weak. Now, before I tell you what Jacob found when he got this mysterious woman back to his ranch, I've got to know. Where are you watching this from? Drop your location in the comments. Are you somewhere warm, safe from the kind of winter that kills people out here? Or are you watching from somewhere that understands what real cold, real danger feels like? Let me know, because this story is about to get a whole lot colder. Jacob's ranch house sat dark and isolated, 5 miles from the nearest neighbor. He kicked the door open, carried the woman inside, laid her by the fire he built with shaking hands. Only then did he get a good look at her. Beautiful. Dangerously so. The kind of beautiful that had started wars. She couldn't have been more than 22. Apache, clearly. He recognized the beadwork on her dress, the silver at her throat. But what was she doing out here? Apache didn't venture this far into settler territory anymore. Not after the massacres. Not after everything that had burned between their peoples. Not unless they were desperate. Or unless they were bait. Jacob loaded his rifle and waited. The shooters didn't follow. They rarely did when prey made it to his property. He had a reputation. The kind that kept most men honest and most trouble at arm's length. But his reputation wouldn't mean spit if this woman died on his floor. He cleaned her wounds. Exposure, exhaustion, cuts from running through rough country. No bullet holes, thank God. As he worked, she murmured in Apache, fevered words he couldn't understand. Until her eyes snapped open, dark as midnight, sharp as obsidian. She grabbed his wrist with surprising strength, pulled herself up to face him. Her English came accented but clear. "Are you Jacob Thorn?" His blood went cold. "How do you know my name?" "Everyone knows your name." She coughed, winced. "The rancher who lives alone. The white man whose wife." She paused. Something like sympathy crossing her face. "I'm sorry. About your wife." Jacob pulled back, stood. His hand drifted to his rifle. "Who are you? Why were you on my land?" "My name is Aiyana." She struggled to sit up fully, proud despite her condition. "Daughter of Chief Nantan. I need your help." "Apache Chief's daughter." Jacob laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Right, and I'm supposed to believe you just happened to be dying on my property by coincidence." "I'm running," her voice cracked. "My father wants to marry me to a warrior I don't love, a man twice my age. I ran. I've been running for 2 days. Those men. Reed's boys, land developers. They shoot Apache on sight." Jacob studied her face, looking for the lie. "Why come here? Why my ranch?" Aiyana met his eyes, and what happened next would change everything. She smiled, small, said, "Real. Because they say you're kind. They say you're different. She leaned forward, firelight dancing across her face. Because you're alone and I'm alone, and it's almost Christmas and I'm so tired of running. Jacob Thorn. So tired. The wind howled outside. The fire crackled. Jacob stood at a crossroads he could feel in his bones. 5 years ago, his wife Sarah had died because he'd trusted the wrong people. Because he'd been naive about the violence simmering in these territories. He'd sworn never again, never let anyone close, never expose himself to that kind of pain. But this woman, this girl, really, was shivering by his fire, wearing courage like armor over her fear. "Please," Aiyana whispered, "just until Christmas. Just a few days, then I'll disappear. You'll never see me again." Jacob should have said no. Every instinct screamed warning. Apache chief's daughter shows up right when tensions are exploding over land rights. Right when Reed's men are getting bolder. Right when whispers of war are riding every winter wind. Instead, he heard himself say, "You can stay." Relief flooded her face. "Thank you, thank you." She reached for his hand, squeezed it. Her skin was fever hot. "You won't regret this." But he already did. As he helped her to his spare room, as he brought her water and blankets, as she settled into the bed where no one had slept since Sarah died, Jacob couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just invited a wolf into his home. That night, after Aiyana had fallen into exhausted sleep, Jacob sat in his kitchen and stared at the locked drawer where he kept Sarah's things. Her letters, her portrait, the last vestiges of the man he used to be. From the spare room, he heard Aiyana murmur in her sleep, "You're all I want for Christmas." The words drifted like smoke, like prayer, like prophecy. Jacob didn't know that in 4 days those words would be covered in blood. He didn't know that the woman sleeping in his house was a spy. And he had no idea that everything he thought he knew about the violence in this valley, about who was killing whom and why, was a carefully constructed lie. But he was about to find out. The first clue should have been the way Aiyana moved. Too careful, too calculated, like every step was measured, every glance a reconnaissance mission. Jacob noticed it on the second morning, watching from his porch as she fed his chickens. She wasn't just feeding them, she was memorizing the layout of his property, counting his livestock, noting where his ranch hands worked. A woman fleeing an arranged marriage wouldn't case a place like a military scout. But Jacob said nothing. Because God help him, he wanted to believe her. You ever want something so badly you ignore every red flag, every warning sign? Drop a yes in the comments if you've ever made that mistake, because Jacob Thorn is about to make it in the worst way possible. Christmas was 2 days away. Aiyana had transformed his lonely ranch house into something almost alive. She'd sewn new curtains from fabric she'd found in his storage. Strung pine branches over the doorways. The scent of juniper and wood smoke filled rooms that had been dead for 5 years. And every night by the fire, she'd lean close while he taught her to read from Sarah's old books. "This word?" she'd point, her shoulder touching his. "Redemption," he'd say. "Redemption," she'd sound it out. "What does it mean?" "Second chances. Forgiveness for past mistakes." She'd look at him then, those dark eyes holding mysteries he couldn't decode. "Do you believe in redemption, Jacob?" He'd wanted to say no. Instead, "I'm starting to." That was when she'd kissed him the first time. Soft, brief, gone before he could respond. "You're all I want for Christmas," she'd whispered, echoing that first fevered night. Jacob's heart, that traitorous organ, believed her. His head knew better. On the third morning, he followed her. Aiyana had offered to check his northern fence line, eager, helpful, the perfect guest. But Jacob took a different trail, staying downwind, tracking her like the cavalry scouts had taught him during the war. She rode straight past the fences, climbed to a rocky outcrop, and there, in the weak December sunlight, she built a fire. Not for warmth. The smoke rose in patterns, signals. Jacob's stomach turned to ice as he watched her communicate with someone in the distant hills. Short bursts, long trails, the old Apache code that every settler feared. She was reporting. But what? And to whom? He should have confronted her, thrown her off his property, ridden to Fort Bowie and reported a spy. Instead, he went home and pretended he'd seen nothing. That night when she asked to see his office, "I want to learn about ranching," she'd said with that smile. He'd let her in, watched her eyes scan his desk, his filing cabinets, his locked drawers. Watched her fingers trail over documents she couldn't possibly read. "You have so many papers," she observed, "about land, property deeds, water rights, boring stuff. Nothing is boring if it matters to you." She'd turned then, caught him watching her. "Why are you looking at me like that? Like what? Like you're trying to solve a puzzle." "Because you are a puzzle," he'd thought, "and I'm terrified of what the completed picture will show." But what he'd said was, "You remind me of her, my wife." The lie came easy. Aiyana's face softened with sympathy, and Jacob hated himself for the manipulation. Two could play the deception game. "Tell me about her," Aiyana had asked. So he did. He told her about Sarah's kindness, her fierce protection of the weak, her stubborn belief that peace between settlers and Apache was possible. He told her about the night Sarah had ridden out to warn an Apache village about an impending raid, and how she'd been killed by the very men she'd been trying to stop. What he didn't tell her, those men worked for Thornton Reed, the land developer, the same man whose hired guns had been shooting at him the night he'd found Aiyana, and he definitely didn't tell her about the families. The Apache families he'd been hiding in his canyon caves for 18 months. The dozen children, women, and elders who should have been dead, massacred in Reed's land-clearing operations, but whom Jacob had secretly relocated to his property, the elaborate underground railroad he'd constructed, the reason he'd been buying up every scrap of territory between his ranch and the reservation, the reason Reed wanted him dead. If Aiyana was a spy, she was looking for evidence of raids, violence, stolen goods. She'd never imagined she was standing in the headquarters of the territory's most successful Apache rescue operation. On Christmas Eve morning, everything accelerated. Jacob woke to find Aiyana already gone. He tracked her to his locked office, the door now hanging open, the lock picked clean. His papers scattered across the desk, his hidden documents exposed. Documents labeled Protection Operation, supply manifests for blankets, medicine, food, maps showing caves and hidden trails. To anyone looking for evidence of organized raids, it was a smoking gun. Jacob's blood ran cold. She'd found exactly what she'd been looking for, except she'd found it all wrong. He heard her horse galloping away, saw her silhouette racing toward the hills, toward her people, toward whatever trap was about to spring shut around his neck. Jacob should have run, should have gathered the families from the caves and scattered them before Nantan's warriors arrived. Instead, he made his second stupid decision. He followed her. The trail led to Black Canyon, where the winter wind screamed through stone channels like the ghosts of the dead. Aiyana's horse stood riderless at the canyon mouth. And there, 50 yards ahead, Jacob saw them. Aiyana, on her knees in the snow, facing a cave entrance he knew too well, and emerging from that cave, one by one, were Apache families. His families, the ones he'd saved, children rubbing sleep from their eyes, women carrying infants, old warriors who'd been written off as dead. They were gathering around Aiyana, confused, frightened. She was staring at them like she'd seen a resurrection. Jacob stepped from cover, rifle raised. "Don't move!" Aiyana spun. Her face was a mask of confusion, tears streaming down her cheeks. "What is this? What are these people doing here? You're the spy. You tell me." "I'm not." She stopped, started again. "Jacob, I thought you were. My father said you were leading the raids, killing our people. These supplies, these maps, are for keeping them alive." The words hung between them like smoke. An old woman stepped forward, spoke rapidly in Apache. Aiyana's face transformed as she listened, shock to understanding to something like horror. The woman gestured to Jacob, spoke his name with reverence. Other voices joined in, Apache words tumbling over each other. Aiyana turned back to Jacob. She says you saved her grandchildren. That white men came to burn their village, and you hid them here. That you've been bringing them food through the winter. Your father thought I was stockpiling for raids? Jacob laughed bitterly. I've been stockpiling to keep your people from starving. But the smoke signals, I told him you were the enemy. That's when they heard it. Hoofbeats, dozens of them, coming from 2 directions. Jacob's face went white. No, not today. Not Christmas Eve. Aiyana grabbed his arm. What is it? Your father's coming from the north. I can hear the war drums. Then we'll explain. Reed's men are coming from the south. I know those horses. The trap was springing shut, but it wasn't the trap anyone had planned. They had maybe 5 minutes before everything exploded. Jacob grabbed Aiyana's shoulders. Listen to me. Your father thinks I'm his enemy. Reed's men want me dead because I'm protecting Apache families. If these 2 forces hit my ranch at the same time, it'll be a massacre. Aiyana's eyes went wide. My father will think Reed's men are with you. Reed's men will use it as an excuse to wipe out everyone, these families. We'll be caught in the crossfire. The old woman was already moving, calling out in rapid Apache. The families scattered back into the caves like shadows. Jacob watched his 18 months of careful protection about to crumble into violence and death. We have to stop them, Aiyana said. How? You think they'll listen to reason while bullets are flying? She grabbed his face, forced him to look at her. Do you trust me? Jacob almost laughed. Trust. The woman who'd been spying on him, who'd sent smoke signals to her father about his supposed crimes, who'd picked his locks and stolen his documents. But he looked in her eyes and saw something he recognized, the same desperate need to save people that had consumed him since Sarah died. Yeah, he heard himself say. God help me. I trust you. Then ride with me. Now, we split up. You head off Reed's men, I'll stop my father. They'll kill you before you get close enough to talk. Aiyana smiled, and it was fierce. Not if I'm carrying proof. She ran back into the cave, emerged with Jacob's documents, the supply manifests, the protection maps, everything that told the real story. I'll show him. I'll make him understand. Jacob pulled her close, kissed her hard. When they broke apart, she whispered, You're all I want for Christmas. I mean that. I should have said it from the beginning. Tell me after, if there is an after. They mounted their horses and split apart, racing toward their separate apocalypses. Jacob hit his ranch at full gallop, saw Reed's hired guns spreading out across his southern property line. 15 men, heavily armed, moving with the confidence of people who'd never faced consequences. Leading them was Thornton Reed himself, mounted on a black stallion, wearing a suit that cost more than most settlers made in a year. Thorn, Reed's voice carried across the frozen ground. Time to discuss your property sale. Not selling, Reed! Not today, not ever! Then I'm afraid this gets unpleasant. Reed's men raised their rifles. Jacob was 1 man against 15. The math was simple and ugly. Then the war cry split the morning air. From the north, Nantan's warriors crested the hill, 30 Apache fighters painted for war, moving like a storm. They saw Jacob, they saw Reed's men, and they saw exactly what Nantan had expected to see. A white rancher backed by hired guns, caught in the act of staging raids from his property. The Apache charge began. Reed's men spun, confused, suddenly facing a threat from 2 directions. Rifles swung wildly. Someone fired, then everyone was firing. Jacob threw himself off his horse as bullets turned the air into a metal rain. This was it. The war everyone had been predicting, starting right here on his ranch, killing everyone he'd been trying to save. Then she appeared. Aiyana, riding between the 2 forces, screaming in Apache at the top of her lungs. Her hair was wild, her dress torn from riding hard, and she was waving Jacob's documents above her head, like a flag of truce. "Father, stop!" Nantan's warriors faltered, confused by seeing the chief's daughter in the kill zone. Reed's men kept shooting. They didn't care who she was. Jacob watched in horror as a rifle swung toward Aiyana. Reed himself taking careful aim. "No!" Jacob's shout was drowned by gunfire, but his body moved on instinct. He ran into the open, directly into Reed's line of fire, putting himself between the land developer and Aiyana. The bullet took him high in the shoulder, spun him sideways. He went down hard, blood spreading across the frozen ground. But he'd bought seconds. Seconds for Aiyana to reach her father. Seconds for her to throw the documents at Nantan's feet. Seconds for her to scream the truth in their shared language, that Jacob Thorn wasn't their enemy, that he'd been saving their people, that the real killers were the men in suits shooting at them right now. Nantan looked at his daughter, at the documents, at the white rancher bleeding in the dirt who'd taken a bullet meant for her, then at Thornton Reed, who was already reloading. The choice took a heartbeat. Nantan wheeled his horse and drove straight at Reed's line. His warriors followed, but not toward Jacob's ranch, toward the hired guns. The Apache charge hit Reed's men like divine retribution. Chaos erupted. Reed's carefully orchestrated land grab dissolved into a desperate retreat as his men realized they were suddenly, catastrophically, outnumbered. Reed himself spurred his horse, trying to escape. But Jacob, wounded, furious, done with this man's violence, raised his rifle with his good arm and fired. The shot took Reed's horse in the leg. The animal went down, throwing Reed hard. The land developer scrambled up, drew a pistol, aimed at Jacob's head. "If I can't have this territory," Reed snarled, "then nobody." The arrow took him through the chest. Perfect, silent, final. Reed's eyes went wide with shock. He looked down at the arrow, then up at Nantan, who'd lowered his bow. The land developer crumpled into the bloody snow. Silence crashed over the battlefield. Jacob lay bleeding, watching the world spin. Through the haze of pain, he saw Nantan dismount, saw the Apache chief walk slowly toward him. This was it, the moment of truth. Jacob had taken a bullet for Nantan's daughter, yes, but he was still a white man on Apache land, caught in the middle of decades of bloodshed. Nantan stood over him, face unreadable. Then did something Jacob never expected. The chief extended his hand. Behind him, Aiyana was crying, running toward Jacob, falling to her knees beside him. She pressed cloth against his wound, her tears falling hot on his face. "You fool!" she sobbed. "You beautiful fool! Why did you—" "Had to," Jacob managed. "Couldn't let him. Couldn't let you." "I love you," Aiyana whispered. "I'm so sorry. I love you. Please don't die. Please." Nantan spoke in Apache, the words flowing like water. Aiyana translated through her tears. "He says, He says you're either the bravest man he's ever met or the stupidest. He hasn't decided which." Jacob coughed, tasted blood. "Tell him, probably both." A ghost of a smile crossed Nantan's weathered face. He barked orders, and suddenly, Apache warriors were helping Jacob's ranch hands round up Reed's surviving men. "We're tending to wounds on both sides. We're moving with purpose instead of violence. Someone found the documents that had fallen in the snow. Found Reed's saddlebags, too, stuffed with contracts and deeds and evidence of every illegal land grab, every bribed official, every murdered family. Proof that would bring federal marshals running." As consciousness started to slip away, Jacob heard Nantan speaking to Aiyana. Her response was fierce, defiant. The chief looked at his daughter, really looked at her, then at the white rancher she was cradling. What he saw made him nod, slowly. "Jacob." Aiyana's voice called him back from the darkness. "Stay with me, stay with me. The families are coming out of the caves. They're telling everyone what you did. My father understands now. You're safe. We're all safe." You were a spy," Jacob whispered. "The worst spy in history." She laughed through her tears. "I fell in love with my target. Mission accomplished then. Shut up. Save your strength." But Jacob needed to say it. "You're all I want for Christmas, too. Mean that. Always have." Then the darkness took him, but it was gentle this time. Soft as snowfall, warm as her hand in his. Jacob woke to the sound of children laughing. That's how he knew he was either dead or dreaming, because children didn't laugh on his ranch. Hadn't in 5 years, not since Sarah. But when he opened his eyes, the laughter was real. He was in his own bed. He recognized the ceiling beams, the way afternoon light slanted through the window. His shoulder was bandaged, immobilized, screaming with pain that told him he was definitely alive. And through the open door, he could hear voices. Apache and English, mixing together like they'd always belonged that way. Aiyana appeared in the doorway, carrying a bowl of something that smelled like medicine and hope. "You're awake." Her smile could have lit the whole territory. 3 days, Jacob. You've been unconscious for 3 days. It's Christmas night." Did we win? Yes." She sat beside him, started spooning broth into his mouth before he could protest. "Reed is dead. His men are in custody. Federal marshals came from Fort Bowie when they saw the evidence in his saddlebags. Turns out Reed had been bribing half the territorial government." "The scandal is massive." Jacob tried to sit up, failed. "The families, safe, all of them. My father knows everything now." Aiyana's voice softened. "He knows what you've been doing, how you've been saving our people, while everyone thought you were just another land-hungry settler. Now, before I tell you what happened next, I need to know something. Have you ever had to choose between what people expected you to do and what you knew was right? Drop a comment if you've ever stood at that crossroads, because that's exactly where Jacob and Aiyana are standing right now." Through the window, Jacob could see an impossible scene unfolding in his yard. Apache warriors and his ranch hands, former enemies, working together to clear snow, tend horses, build fires. Children ran between them, unburdened by the hatred their parents had carried. Old grudges were melting faster than the winter ice. "Your father," Jacob said carefully, "he's okay with this, with us?" Aiyana's expression flickered. "He's Apache, he's a chief, he's a father watching his daughter fall in love with a white man." She took his hand. "He's struggling, but Jacob, he saw you take a bullet meant for me. He saw you risk everything to protect families you didn't even know. That matters, but not enough. It's a beginning." She squeezed his fingers. "He's agreed to an alliance. Your ranch becomes a protected zone. a place where Apache families can shelter during hard winters. In return, the tribe will help guard against future land thieves. It's not perfect, but it's more than we had yesterday. Exactly. Jacob closed his eyes, processing. An alliance, after decades of bloodshed. A fragile peace, born from bullets and betrayal and unexpected love. It felt too good to be true, which meant it probably was. "What's the catch?" he asked. Aiyana hesitated. There it was, the shadow crossing her face. "I have to go back with him, to the reservation, to rebuild trust. My father says I betrayed my mission, fell for the enemy, put tribal security at risk, by letting emotion cloud my judgment." "You saved everyone!" "I know, he knows. But appearances matter. Politics matter. I have to be seen making the right choice for my people." She paused. "He's giving me until spring. When the snow melts, I'm to return and there's talk of the original marriage arrangement being honored. To strengthen tribal alliances." Jacob's blood went cold. "No. Jacob! No. You can't go back to marry some warrior you don't love. Not after everything. It's not about what I want. It's about what my people need." But her voice cracked. "This is bigger than us. Nothing's bigger than us." Jacob struggled to sit up, his wound screaming protest. "Aiyana, listen to me. I spent 5 years alone because I was too afraid to care about anyone, too afraid to risk the pain. Then you showed up, a spy sent to destroy me, and you became the only thing I want to save." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You make it sound simple. It is simple. Do you love me? You know I do. Then stay, or let me come with you, or we'll find a third option. But don't ask me to let you walk away into a life you don't want." Aiyana stood, walked to the window, arms wrapped around herself. Outside, the sun was setting on Christmas Day, painting the snow in shades of amber and gold. "My father says if you truly care about me, you'll let me go. That holding on would be selfish." "And what do you say?" She turned back to him, and her eyes held that same fierce determination he'd seen when she rode between two armies. "I say my father doesn't get to decide my entire life. I say I'm tired of being a pawn in tribal politics. I say—" She trailed off as the door opened. Nantan stood there, tall and weathered, his face carved from stone. He spoke in Apache, sharp, commanding words. Aiyana responded, her voice rising, a father-daughter argument playing out in a language Jacob couldn't understand, but felt in his bones. Then Nantan did something unexpected. He laughed, not a big laugh, just a small, grudging acknowledgement of something. He spoke again, gentler this time, and placed his hand on Aiyana's head. A blessing. Or maybe a surrender. When he left, Aiyana was crying and smiling at the same time. "What did he say?" Jacob demanded. "He said I'm as stubborn as my mother was, that he recognizes that look in my eyes because he wore it when he chose her over political advantage." She wiped her tears. "He said when spring comes I can make my own choice, that if I choose you, I choose you. But Jacob, he also said I need these months to be sure, to think clearly, away from the romance of bullets and Christmas miracles. And if you're still sure in spring, then I come back, and we figure out how to build a life that honors both our worlds. And if you're not sure," Aiyana crossed back to the bed, leaned down, kissed him softly, "then you'll know where to find me. You've always been good at finding Apache families in need of protection." She smiled when she said it, but Jacob heard the fear underneath, the uncertainty, the very real possibility that winter would freeze whatever they'd started, and spring would thaw it into something unrecognizable. That night, the ranch hosted the strangest Christmas celebration Arizona Territory had ever seen. Apache families shared space with settlers, traditional songs mixed with frontier ballads. For a few hours, peace wasn't a dream. It was real and breathing and alive. But when Jacob watched Aiyana prepare to leave the next morning, watched her gather her things and mount her horse beside her father, reality crashed back in. "Spring," she called back to him, "when the first flowers bloom. I'll be waiting," he promised. And as he watched her ride away into the winter dawn, Jacob Thorn, the man who'd sworn never to hope again, allowed himself to hope. But hope is a dangerous thing in the Arizona territory, especially when winter is long and promises are fragile. Spring came late to Arizona in 1883. Jacob counted every frozen day of it. January bled into February. February crawled into March. The snow melted so slowly, Jacob thought he'd go mad watching it. Every morning he'd check the valleys for the first wildflowers. Every evening he'd scan the hills for riders that never came. His shoulder healed. The scars stayed, physical and otherwise. The alliance held barely. Apache families still used his canyon caves during the worst storms. His ranch hands had stopped flinching when warriors appeared at the property line. Small mercies, tiny revolutions. But Aiyana wasn't there to see them. Jacob threw himself into work. He expanded the caves, built better shelters, used Reed's confiscated fortune, awarded to him by the territorial court, to buy more land, created a buffer zone that stretched for miles, a neutral territory where Apache and settlers could coexist. People called him crazy. They weren't entirely wrong. "She's not coming back," his foreman said one night in mid-March. "Boss, you gotta accept it. Indian chiefs don't let their daughters marry white ranchers. That's just reality." But Jacob had stopped believing in other people's reality. He'd seen impossible things. Enemies becoming allies, betrayal becoming love, Christmas miracles born from bullets and snow. If those things could happen, why not this? Quick question, for those of you still watching. Do you believe in second chances? Do you think people can really change, that love can bridge impossible divides? Let me know in the comments, because this story is about to test that belief one last time. April arrived with a vengeance. Wildflowers exploded across the valleys overnight, lupine and paintbrush and desert marigold. The air smelled like possibility. Jacob was in his northern pasture when he saw her. A single rider, silhouetted against the morning sun. Dark hair streaming, moving at an easy canter, like she had all the time in the world. Like she'd never doubted this moment would come. Aiyana. Jacob's heart stopped, restarted, hammered against his ribs. He didn't run to her, didn't want to seem desperate, even though he absolutely was. He just stood there, frozen. As she approached, she looked different, stronger somehow, more certain. She wore a mix of Apache and settler clothing, a traditional dress over denim, silver jewelry catching the light. A bridge between worlds, just like Jacob had imagined. She stopped her horse 10 feet away, dismounted slowly. They stood looking at each other across a distance that felt both enormous and insignificant. "You came back," Jacob said, brilliant, articulate, all the things he'd rehearsed for 3 months gone. "I told you I would. It's been 93 days, I counted every one." Aiyana stepped closer. "Jacob, I need to tell you what happened, what I learned." His stomach tightened. Here it was, the rejection speech, the explanation about duty and family and impossible situations. "I spent the winter helping my father negotiate with the territorial government. Using everything we learned from Reed's documents, we secured water rights, grazing land, protections." She paused. "Your testimony helped. The fact that a white rancher stood up for Apache families, it changed conversations. That's good. That's really good." "It is. But Jacob, I also spent the winter figuring out what I want, who I am. and I realized something. She closed the distance between them, took his hands. I'm tired of being who everyone expects me to be. The perfect chief's daughter, the political pawn, the bridge between cultures who never gets to choose her own path. Aiyana, I choose you. I choose this. I choose building something new instead of maintaining something broken. Her eyes blazed with certainty. But I need you to understand what that means. I'll face rejection from some of my people. You'll face judgment from yours. This won't be easy. Jacob pulled her close, careful of his still healing shoulder. Nothing worth having ever is. That's remarkably wise for a man who took a bullet on Christmas Eve. I had a good teacher. She laughed, and the sound erased 3 months of doubt. They spent the rest of the day showing each other what they'd built. Jacob's expanded caves, now winter homes with real furniture and supplies. Aiyana's maps of the new territorial agreements. Evidence that impossible things could become real if enough people believed. That evening, as sunset painted the desert in impossible colors, they stood where Jacob had first found her. Half frozen, fevered, claiming to run from an arranged marriage. Was any of it true? Jacob asked. That first night. The fever was real, the fear was real, but I wasn't running from marriage. Aiyana leaned into him. I was running toward something I didn't have a name for yet. My father knew. He sent me to spy on you, yes, but he hoped I'd find what he found with my mother. Someone worth choosing over everything else. Manipulative old man. The best kind. She smiled. He told me something before I left. He said the strongest alliances aren't built on contracts or treaties. They're built on individuals brave enough to love across boundaries. Wise words. He has his moments. Here's what I learned from Jacob and Aiyana's story, and I hope you'll take this with you. The bravest thing you can do isn't always the biggest gesture. It's not taking a bullet or riding between armies, though those help. The bravest thing is choosing love when hate is easier, building bridges when everyone else is building walls, trusting someone when betrayal seems more logical. Because here's the truth, we all build walls. Against people who are different, against ideas that challenge us, against possibilities that seem too good to be true. And those walls keep us safe. But they also keep us alone. Jacob and Aiyana could have let their walls stand. They had every reason to. History, violence, betrayal, fear, the construction materials were all there. But they chose to tear them down instead, to risk everything for the possibility of something better. And that's not just a love story, that's a blueprint for changing the world. As the stars emerged over the Arizona territory that night, Jacob Thorn, no longer lonely, no longer afraid, held the woman who'd been sent to destroy him and had instead saved him. "You're all I want for Christmas," she whispered, echoing that first impossible night. "Good thing I'm a gift that keeps on giving," he replied. She hit his good shoulder. "Terrible. That was terrible. You love it. I love you." And in the end, that was the only truth that mattered. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the walls you've built and the bridges you could build instead, do me a favor. Subscribe to this channel. Hit that notification bell, because every week I'm bringing you stories like this, tales of courage, redemption, and people who dared to be braver than their circumstances demanded. Drop a comment telling me, what wall are you going to tear down today? What bridge are you going to build? Who are you going to choose when logic says you shouldn't? Because the world needs more Jacobs and Aiyanas, more people willing to take bullets for strangers, more love that crosses boundaries, more Christmas miracles born from the most unlikely places. That's the real Wild West, not the gunfights and glory, but the quiet revolutions that happen when two people decide hate ends with them. Now go out there and start your own revolution. I'll see you in the next story.